In our examination of the book that is accredited to the Apostle Matthew, called the Gospel of Matthew, we find ourselves in chapter 14, and we will be reading verses 13 and 14. I'm going to be reading from the Williams translation. When Jesus heard it, he left there in a boat for a quiet place to be alone. And when the crowds heard of it, they followed him on foot from the town. So when he got out of the boat and saw a great crowd, his heart was moved with pity for them, and, and he cured their sick people. When we step into the scene of the feeding of the 5,000, notice what Matthew links it to. The death of John the Baptist could not help but change the tone of Jesus' ministry. These were dangerous times for all prophets and all would-be prophets. In modern proclamation, we have made moral diatribes separated from political pronouncements. We tend to make it either or. You can talk about morality or you can talk about politics. John the Baptist and Jesus were making proclamations that held these two together. In other words, their call to live a right life had political implications. If you preach politics, the regime changes. In more recent decades, you can think of the Sandinistas in Nicaragua and the influence of the priests on that government, who operated out of the genre of theology called liberation theology. You see, you change the politics, but the humanity remains the same. You haven't really changed anything. If you preach morality, you get legalism, and often what has happened in the history of the church is a class system that exploits this. If you preach that all must truly repent, you will shake the very foundations of society. Is it any wonder when one does that heads begin to roll? In one direction, Jesus could look back and see what happened to John the Baptist, and then he could look forward to see the crowds and what they wanted. Verse 13 of Matthew 14 indicates that Jesus tried to slip away quietly. Jesus had to collect his thoughts. He had just heard that his cousin had been murdered, John the Baptist. In a sense, we could say he was not ready to face the crowds. He needs to step back, take a breath, gather his thoughts, you know. And I relate that from our own sense of experience of what we would do or feel the need to do. We can say this, for we know how we would feel in a situation like this. It doesn't take much to kind of get a sense of what Jesus was feeling. The crowds did not give up. The crowds knew what Jesus could do. In a day and age when there were not all the doctors and hospitals that we have today, it is easy to see why people flocked to Jesus. Then there was the demon possessed and probably some who had mental disorders. I'm sure that there were many who were intrigued by the message of Jesus. I tend to think that most of the people who were following Jesus around were not doing so for noble reasons. So imagine how Jesus did it. He was dealing with the loss of someone important to him, and now he was dealing with people who were coming for what they could get out of him. If it was me, I doubt that the people would have found compassion that Jesus gave on the other side of the lake. I don't know about you. I wouldn't be there waiting to love that crowd. That's not usually how I work. Let us be brutally honest here. We would probably not say it is a fair test of our Christian faith if we've been up half the night dealing with a vomiting child, knowing we have a critical meeting in the afternoon, and if that morning of that day we are forced to deal with some obnoxious door-to-door marketer. I mean, for most of us, put us in the right situation, I think we are quite capable of blowing our cool. The test of our faith is not in those situations where all is well. In a way, we know how deep the faith is in us when we have the right to blow our cool. And in particular, know from past experience it is a situation where we would blow our cool and we do not do it. The life of faith is a call to live it in the reality of life, even if it means dealing with a bunch of selfish and demanding individuals.